Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and today I'm bringing you a book review from the classic original 62 series. And it's book number 2, Stay Out of the Basement. I have here the Tim Jacobus 2003 reprint, because in case you didn't know, the original cover, the iconic cover with the hand, was done by a fellow by the name of Jim Thiessen. And the first two Goosebumps books, Welcome to Dead House and Stay Out of the Basement, were a test run for artists to see which one will end up getting the permanent work. And Scholastic ended up going with Tim Jacobus and over Jim Thiessen. And Jim Thiessen only ever did one cover for the series. So when these 2000 reprints came out, 2003 reprints, Tim Jacobus did a cover for the reprints, and as well for Be Careful What You Wish For, which had a cover done by Stanislaw Hernandez, because Tim Jacobus was on vacation when that book was being released. Cool little fact. And he also did one for Be Careful What You Wish For. So there are Tim Jacobus versions. I happen to be one of the people that prefer this cover because I think it captures the science fiction element this book is going for, which I'm going to say off the bat, I really dig the concept of this book. I'm a huge fan of science fiction horror, like, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, The Fly, which this book is basically a concept derivative of that story. I love stories like this, and this story is one of the uniquer feeling Goosebumps books, even though there are other books later on, as you'll read in the franchise. The more you read, the more you'll get to know. There are some books that play on a lot of things this book touches on, but I think this book is special, and especially in the early days of the series. This is one of the true gems of the original 62 and that early period. So let me get into the plot review without giving too much away. There's a lot of stuff that happens in this book, so I'm going to try to skim when I can and try to, not give too much away, but try to give a little bit of detail without spoiling the very end, of course. So the plot starts with Margaret and Casey are talking with their mother, and their mother basically addresses them that she's going to have to go away for a while and visit their Aunt Eleanor, who happens to be sick, and she has to go to Tucson. She doesn't know how long she's going to be gone, but she assures them that they'll be home with their father, and everything should be okay, and they talk about how their father, ever since he's been laid off from his lab job, he's been so focused on his work that the kids almost don't exist to him, and they express concerns, but the mom has no other choice, really. And it comes to the day where Margaret and Casey have to say goodbye to their mom, and of course the dad has to take their mom to the airport. Now, there's this suspicion about the basement that Margaret and Casey have been wanting to go down and see what's down there, but they never have because they fear of getting scolded by their father, because they tried it and they got yelled at. And on the day that Dr. Brewer, who's the father, takes their mom to the airport, Margaret's friend happened to be over, and Margaret's friend convinces them to go down in the basement and let's see what's down there. And when they go down there, they see this really tall machine that's in the shape of a phone booth, and there's two machines, and there's glass cases with plant organisms everywhere. It's super hot down in this basement. It is winter in California, so it's kind of chilly. So Casey's wearing a sweatshirt, and he takes off a sweatshirt while they're down there. And they're exploring around, and they notice this room is just filled with exotic-looking plants, some bearing some fruit, some of them with really long tendrils that are pretty aggressive. And off the bat, Casey has an interaction with one of these plants, and it creeps the kids out, so they try to skedaddle out of the basement. And when they all three get out, they notice that their father has pulled into the driveway, but is talking with the neighbor guy. And the father likes to do some service work for the neighbor because he's like a handy guy. And Casey freaks out, and he's like, oh crap, I left my sweatshirt in the basement. So Margaret is trying to stall her father until Casey can get out of the basement. Julie skedaddles out of the house. She doesn't want to be there. She's already weirded out by the whole situation down in the basement with the tendrils. And Margaret confronts her father once Casey gets out about what's going on in the basement, and the father assures that in time he will tell them, but as of now, it's going to have to remain a secret. So the next day, Margaret wakes up in the morning and she observes her father, who is doing something strange in the kitchen. She can't really make out what it is. He leaves to go do something, and she goes to the trash can to observe and sees that he was eating plant food, which is very bizarre. Later on, they're playing frisbee outside later that day, and the father comes outside with a hat on that normally he doesn't wear a hat. Now, this is one of the parts of the book that it just randomly just starts, hey, he's wearing a hat, you know? And he's wearing a hat, and when they're playing frisbee, they accidentally hit their father in the head and knocks off his hat, and there's plants growing out of his head. And this freaks the kids out, and the kids immediately ask their father, why are you growing plants out of your head, like plant leaves? And he said this was an accident. He's doing some really important research with plants. It's very unusual work. It's just side effect. His hair will grow back to normal in no time. And Margaret feels bad because now she realizes that, hey, her father's doing some really crucial work where he can grow plants out of his head. This has to be something breakthrough, like for science. This has to be a scientific breakthrough enough for him to dedicate all this time. And she has this understanding. So she kind of takes a step back and says, maybe I should stop distrusting my father so much. Maybe stop having so much suspicion about him. That's until late one night, presumably the same night, she's in her bed, she's tossing and turning, she can't go to sleep. She goes downstairs and tries to get some water, and she hears some noise, so she goes to see what the noise is from her father's bedroom, and lo and behold, there's blood oozing out of his arm, and there's some, still with the leaves in his head, and the blood is green, like bright green. And this freaks Margaret out. She basically tries to go and hide because I think her father catches her. And then later on, she can't sleep, so she confronts Casey and tells him about what she saw. And they figure out that something is not right with their father. So, of course, later on, I'm kind of going to skim over some things that really don't matter here. Later on, Margaret and Casey get growingly suspicious with their father. Their father has now locked the door to the basement, and Casey is like, okay, he started locking the door. Maybe he's thinking that we're catching on to him or something. Maybe he thinks we're spying on him. And this all takes place after an event where Dr. Brewer tries to feed them this really weird green substance a little while after Margaret spies on him in the bathroom. This really weird green substance, and I have no idea what it is. It could be like radioactive plant DNA. I don't know what the story was going with this, but it never touched on it again. But that scene is very unnerving because this is the scene where the father is like pressuring the kids to eat this. But then this doctor that he used to work with at his old lab that he was fired from had come over to visit and started to go down in the basement, and basically the father told the kids to, skedaddle, and then there were some noises coming from the basement the kids heard, and then the father reemerged, and the doctor that went down there they never saw him leave, but Dr. Brewer said, oh no, he left. So because of that, I think that's why he locked the door. Now, this is where the story kind of has a little plot hole here. They go upstairs to try to snoop around and maybe find the missing. I think the number to reach their mom was missing, and of course Margaret finds the worm bed, which kind of sets off the events where they have to figure out a way to get into the basement, which Casey magically remembered how to pick a lock. and he learned it off page while his mom was on vacation. So in the time that his mom was on vacation, mind you, in the book, the mom's on vacation for like a couple of weeks. He learned how to pick the lock within that time frame, but it was never elaborated on. So he picked the lock, and they go downstairs to see what's down there, and they pick up this axe to arm themselves when they go down. And of course, the plants with the tendrils are still there. They turn on the lights, and they notice this closet, which they break into. And when they break into the closet, they see all of these human hybrid plants with like arms growing out and a bunch of weird stuff going on in this closet. And this is like the main revelation that the father's experiments is basically like human and plant DNA splicing, like animal and plant DNA splicing. This freaks him out, but not so much to the fact that there's a person laying on the floor, and they go to help the person on the floor, and they realize that it's their father. And carrying the axe, they help untie him and free him from what was binding him, and he reveals that he's been held there hostage, and he tries to pick up the axe to defend himself because he doesn't know what to believe. Maybe his kids are now plant copies or something, I don't know. And Dr. Brewer, the one that the kids have presumed to be the actual father, has come home with their mother, who the mother now has come home from her trip visiting their Aunt Eleanor. And their mom witnesses this whole scene where there's two dads, and Margaret is trying to figure out which one is her real father. Now, in the book, there are two nicknames Margaret has. One is Princess and one is Fatso, right? So that's two process of eliminations to figure out who her father really is. And while she's talking with them, and while they're trying to convince her that, hey, I'm your real father, this and that, Margaret hears one of those nicknames, and that was enough for her to swing an axe at one of them and chops one of the dads in half, and sure enough, it's a plant dad. I'm not going to tell you which dad it is, though. So then the story wraps up. Dr. Brewer kind of summarizes after destroying all the stuff in the basement, all the plant stuff in the basement, and working to make it a rec room. He gave his side of the story, what had happened, and he got his job back working at the laboratory because the doctor that went missing down there was also rescued out of there. Lo and behold, he was held there captive by presumably one of them. I'm not going to tell you which one. And he got his job back, and everything seemed to be fine again until the twist ending, which, if you don't know it by now, I mean, it's one of the iconic twist endings, and it makes you think, like, what really had happened, who is really a plant, and it makes you think, and it's one of the standout twist endings, I have to say. And yeah, basically that is Stay Out of the Basement. I did skim over a lot because a lot of stuff happens in this book, and if I get into too much detail, it kind of gives a lot of stuff away here. Let's go into the strengths of this book. I liked how suspenseful this book was. This book just took you on a wild ride. Each layer of suspense just added onto the previous, and it had its own different flavor going for it, and it really enriched the story experience and really made it worth the read in the end result. This was a very satisfying build. The characters, Margaret and Casey. Casey wasn't really what I was hoping for, but then again, he's kind of like the side character, the sidekick to Margaret. Margaret was a pretty good protagonist. I found a lot of sympathy with her because growing up, my father was always at work, and, not by choice, because he just had to work a lot of hours because of the job he worked, and that meant sacrificing a few things, like missing some baseball games and stuff. So I kind of found a lot of things resonating within me in the character Margaret when I was probably her age. And yeah, it's pretty relatable. And I'm sure a lot of kids can probably relate to Margaret and how she feels like her relationship from her father has grown distant, and how she wishes that she can mend that relationship. That's very touching stuff for a Goosebumps book. And yeah, and this will always resonate with me because, this is one of those stories that does it really well. Dr. Brewer is a pretty solid villain. There's two Dr. Brewers. I'm not going to tell you which one is the real villain here, but yeah, Dr. Brewer is pretty solid. Very reminiscent to the Vincent Price, The Fly movie. I mean, has all that vibe, the science fiction. I love the atmosphere of this book that blends in with the basement, with Dr. Brewer's mystery and like what he's been going through. I can only imagine the body horror in this gets very descriptive. It's pretty solid. Some really jarring scenes. Like I said, the most tense scene out of this whole book is when he's screaming at the kids to eat the green mush. You can literally cut the tension with a knife. That's how good it's written here. And overall, the ending was pretty solid, I have to say. But there are some negatives that kind of add up here. And let's get into the first one. I'm only going to deduct 0.1 for this. And this is the whole 2 nickname thing for Margaret here. I just don't get why she has a nickname Princess and a nickname Fatso. And then at the climax here, she only uses the Princess nickname to justify who to kill with an axe. Yeah, also, like, axe murder, that's pretty cool. You don't see that kind of thing in Goosebumps. Hardly ever. But anyway, I just found that to be kind of, lacking logic a little bit. Thinking about it, like, I would want as much evidence as possible before I swing an axe at potentially my real father here. So, yeah, I just found that scene to be kind of lacking logic, and it's one of the more it's like the pinnacle scene of the book, and the fact that it lacks logic, I had to deduct 0.1 for that. And I deducted another 0.2 off for these remedial little things that this book does that just skim over things, like how Casey learns to pick a lock, how the door starts to lock to begin with, like stuff like that. It just gets skimmed over in the book, and it's just like, okay, this is starting to happen now. The dad started randomly wearing a hat too. I mean, just little things like that. Those little skimming things just kind of got annoying a little bit for me, where it stood out to me, and I kind of view it as a negative. So, but it's not deal-breaking by any means. So I only deducted 0.2. So all in all, I gave this book a 4.7 out of 5. I think this is really solid. This is an excellent book. I think if you have never read this book, you can go find this book today. Classic Goosebumps is still making it. I know Book 10s have them. This is a great gateway into Goosebumps book. I know Spongy has recommended this book plenty of times. I've seen him do it. This is one of his favorites. It's a great book. It's not one of my favorite books, but I dig it. So yeah, that's my thoughts on State of the Basement, the book. Let me know in the comments section. Did you love this book or did you hate this? I'm dying to know. And I'll see you next time.